Hey, shuckalaka kapow, how's it going, old schoolers? You're kicking it old school at Russell JS, and I am your host, Russell JS. Right now, as we speak, I have a video uploading, which you will find it on the YouTube feed if you're a subscriber and you ring that bell for notifications. An album battle royale, and I'm bringing you yet another album battle royale. Something from 1991. God, I can remember the whole thing with music back in 1991, where everybody that was into music at the time, everybody loved it all. It didn't matter what kind of a music fan you were. If you were into like Madonna and Michael Jackson, you were listening to Guns N' Roses as well, along with, you know, Garth Brooks, Metallica, Def Leppard, and Pearl Jam. But you had some of the purists who were fans of the certain genres of music. And then you had the fans that just loved music, period, that were open-minded. But two classic albums of that time, of 1991, are going to duke it out. And some of you might think of this, whoever wins this one, on both sides, some of you are going to be more of a fan of one and less of a fan of the other. And if one wins against the other, some of you who will, that the winner will be like, oh no, that's blasphemy. Same thing if the other becomes a loser. So which two classic albums are going to duke it out this time? How about Metallica's Black Album versus Nirvana, Nevermind? Now, Metallica, at this time they had already, since the early 1980s, been playing it out at the club scene. They got signed to Megaforce Records, and they were already releasing albums like from Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, and Master of Puppets, and they were starting to become a really big international act. And then a tragedy in Europe while they were touring in support of Master of Puppets took place, where bassist Cliff Burton was killed in a bus accident when their bus collided with ice, and he got thrown through the window and the bus landed on him. And then what happened was they had to go ahead and secure a new bass player. They recruited Jason Newsted, which with him they would go ahead and make an EP of cover albums called Metallica Garage Days Revisited. And then the following year, in 1988, they would come out with And Justice for All, and they would be nominated for a Grammy for Best Heavy Metal Album, which they would lose to Jethro Tull. And how the heck do you call Jethro Tull? Nothing against Jethro Tull, they're a good band and everything, but how do you call Jethro Tull a heavy metal band? That's kind of confusing. I'd put them more in the hard rock, put them up there because they were part of that whole hard rock scene in the 60s with, the Doors and Iron Butterfly and, the Yardbirds, Janis Joplin, all of that. But it is what it is. And then, after extensive touring with Injustice for All, they would go back in the studio. And in 1991, they would release the Black Album. And it was around the time with the grunge movement. Nirvana helped pave the way for the grunge movement. Nirvana, again, by the late 1980s, they were cutting their teeth in the club scene in Seattle. They were coming out with that newer kind of sound that was kind of punk and heavy metal and, kind of, poppy in a way. And, grunge was kind of like a mix of, the classic rock of Led Zeppelin and Hendrix meets the punk era. And pretty soon, Seattle started having a really killer honkin' scene like in the decades past, where Greenwich Village, started a scene in the late 60s going throughout the 70s with Max's Kansas City and CBGB, where bands from the Velvet Underground to Television, the Talking Heads, Blondie, and the Ramones, and also that of similar to Liverpool, during the mid 60s with the British invasion. There was new scenes popping up around the world in the decades, through the decades. South Florida and Florida and Georgia were, coming out with Southern rock. New York was, with the glam, and, like England was forging heavy metal. And I mean, it was just through the decades. But Nirvana, they were coming out with a sound that was similar to punk and old style heavy metal. Now, both these CDs are classics in their own right. And like I said, again, some of you are a fan of one, some of you are a fan of the other. But I'm going to go ahead, and I've already listened to these CDs, from beginning to end, and compared them. And we're going to see where this is going to go. And remember, once again, if you're new to the channel, feel free to hit a like, subscribe, leave comments in that box down below, ring the bell for notifications, and don't forget to tell your friends, your family, like your mom and dad, your brothers, your sisters, your best friend, your girlfriends, your boyfriends, your girlfriends, your husbands, your wives, your brothers and sisters, your nieces and nephews, your aunts and uncles, your sons, your daughters, your grandsons, your granddaughters, your grandpas, your grandmas, your classmates, your coworkers, your roommates, your supervisors, your teachers, your neighbors, your pets, anybody that likes to kick it old school. And without further ado, let's see how these bad Oscars rank out, shall we? Okay, in the case of the Metallica Black Album versus Nirvana Nevermind. Enter Sandman versus Smells Like Teen Spirit. Smells Like Teen Spirit, I actually wanted an electric guitar. When I first saw that video, I had this, this feeling like my parents came from the time when the Beatles were on the Ed Sullivan Show. And they were that generation where a lot of people started bands because of the Beatles and because of the Stones all going on the Ed Sullivan Show. Enter Sandman's an okay song, but you know what? It's one of those that gets played too much. Oh, and by the way, if there are more than 2 ties per song, I don't have a quarter on me to flip, so I got to do the classic eeny, meeny, miny, mo routine. So the point goes to Smells Like Teen Spirit. Sad But True versus In Bloom. Sad But True is an awesome track, but I feel that In Bloom, I love the raw energy and the raw power it displays. It does have that cross of punk and heavy metal vibe combined. So I have to go with In Bloom. Holier Than Thou versus Come As You Are. What can I say? I love both tracks, so it is a tie. So both Metallica and Nirvana take a point for that. Unforgiven, The Unforgiven versus Breed. Breed's an alright song, but I'm going with The Unforgiven. Wherever I May Roam versus Lithium. Okay, this is going to be the second track tie right here. They're both getting a point. I love them both. All right, now, Don't Tread on Me versus Polly. Polly's an okay song, but, something about Don't Tread on Me, it's so heavy, it hits real hard. I'm going with Don't Tread on Me. Through the Never versus Territorial Pissings. Okay, here we go. Here's the third tie. So it's Through the Never versus Territorial Pissings. Here we go. This is kind of silly, kind of goofy, but I don't have a quarter, so eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Territorial Pissings takes the win for that. All right. Nothing Else Matters versus Drain You. I really, Nothing Else Matters really hits close to home with me because it makes me think of my daughter. So close no matter how far, couldn't be much more far apart, forever trust in who we are, nothing else matters. And, well, you do know the story about what happened when I lost my daughter. When I went ahead and I got kicked out of my daughter's life. It was not fun, and it hit me hard, and it'll be 5 years in August since that happened. But once again, I have to do the classic eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Drain You won against Metallica. Yeah, that kind of hurt right there. But just so you know, I do love Nothing Else Matters. I don't care what people say about it. People say it's a sissy song or whatever. You know what? Who cares? Everybody's entitled to his or her own opinion. I have my own opinion. You have your own opinion. He has his own opinion. She has her own opinion. We all have our own opinions. And that's all that matters. Nothing else matters. All right. Of Wolf and Man versus Lounge Act. I have to go with Of Wolf and Man. Oh boy, here's where we got another tie. The God That Failed versus Stay Away. Here we go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Stay Away wins that point. My Friend of Misery versus On a Plane. You know what? Again, this is going to be yet another tie, so I got to be a tiebreaker. So, you know what? I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to take the inner sleeve out of Nevermind. See if I can't flip it, okay? The front cover versus the back photo. All right, My Friend of Misery, heads. On a Plane, tails. And guess what? My Friend of Misery wins that round. All right. Last two tracks. The Struggle Within versus Something in the Way. Something in the Way is too slow and too sloppy. So I like The Struggle Within better. I mean, Something in the Way, it doesn't click with me. So that gets a point, and guess what? Both albums are tied. So you know what that means. Heads to Metallica, tails Nirvana. And you know what? Nirvana is the winner. Now, here's the thing. Don't get it twisted. You see, by tiebreaker, you see, it's all about stroke of fate, luck of the draw. And Nirvana won by a tiebreaker. All right, so there you have it. Nirvana Nevermind clobbers the Black Album. Now, a lot of you diehard Nirvana fans out there are probably going to be happy about that. I know a lot of you diehard Metallica fans aren't going to be too pleased. But remember, it's a stroke of fate. That's all it is. And that's all the time I have for this video. I got other videos in the works. I mean, I got some stuff I still got to go over. I even have Godsmack's self-titled album versus Puddle of Mudd Come Clean. How about that one? And I also got to do, what else do I got on here that I got to do? Here we are. Some of these I've already done, some I haven't. I got to do a tribute to the Ramones, originals versus covers, tribute covers battle. I got that in the works. I've even got Black Sabbath Dehumanizer versus Ozzy Osbourne No More Tears in the works. Oh yeah, here's the one I gotta do. How about Jimmy Page and Robert Plant No Quarter versus Kiss Unplugged? That'll be a good one right there. But I think I'm going to have to remove a couple tracks off Kiss Unplugged. I got to listen to it and figure out what tracks I want to stay and what tracks I'm going to take out. I'm going to take 2 of them out so that way it'll be fair. But at any rate, that's all the time I have for this. Remember, keep it real, keep it fresh, keep it chill, keep kicking it old school, keep listening to old school music, play old school video games, watch old school movies, watch old school TV. Get you enough of love, get you enough of peace, get you enough of tranquility, get you enough of less drama, no drama, less chaos, no chaos. Godspeed, may the force be with you always, and shakalaka kapow!